I would like to preface this rant/story with a disclaimer, and that is that I am in no way endorsed by Tootsie Roll Industries, the makers of Tootsie Rolls, Tootsie Pops, and other assorted delicious candies. However, if they send me a message and they do want to send me candy, I am totally cool with that. Please send me the candy. On the other hand, they probably won't, since my analogy here is kind of weird and at times disgusting. So I just woke up about 30 minutes ago from an interesting and unusual dream. In it that I was, for some reason invited to some sort of panel of YouTubers and game maker discussion group. It's kind of hard to put into words because honestly I didn't recognize anybody there except for one, which I'll get into in a little bit. But the basic idea was a discussion on games and making games and why it seems like the industry is having so much trouble on certain areas, certain aspects. And they basically opened it right up to questions right off the bat. And I had a question, so I raised my hand. And naturally, since it was my dream, they called me first. And so my question that I posed was very simple to them. And that was, how many different ways are there to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop? Not how many licks, granted, that was kind of the joke, but it seemed like an apt question to ask of these people. And the only person there that I recognized in my dream was Jim Sterling. Now, a side note on Jim Sterling, I don't agree with everything he says, but he does bring up some good points. And I think the main reason I asked this question was to get to the point of why there's one thing that me and Jim Sterling do very much agree on. So, back to the question. One of the guys answered pretty plainly and simply. You can lick it, or you can bite through it. And that was the only answers he gave. And that, I think, actually was one of the problems. So I followed it up after a quick comment by Jim Sterling, which was, "Oh, this is gonna be good." I don't know why that was so accurate in my dream, but my subconscious. Anyway, what I followed up with was, and this is kind of the Tootsie Roll analogy as I see it, people in the main game industry have basically been licking it and biting through it for years, and it keeps making them money. So they don't change anything. They just keep, doing those two things that they know how to do really well. A lot of game companies try to focus on making the Tootsie Roll Pop look amazing. Some try to make it seem more delicious by adding different things, different flavors maybe. Adding more sugar, taking out sugar, replacing it with something that isn't sugar. And that's basically the analogy. I think you get it. But the point I was trying to make was they hadn't really even considered other ways to get to the Tootsie Roll center of the Tootsie Pop. And that's what I said. 2, that's it? That's all you can think of? I can think of 7, like off the cuff. And he was like, well, how would you get to the center of it? Well, you could leave it out in the sun, watch it melt, stomp on it, hit it with a hammer. Lots of other things, really. You're trying to get to the center of the Tootsie Roll Pop, not necessarily enjoy eating it. What if you enjoy it by, leaving it out in the road and watching a car run over it? You'll get to the Tootsie Roll center, probably pretty quickly, but that can be enjoyable. And yeah, there's going to be, lots of holes in this analogy, but the point is finding a unique way to the center of that Tootsie Roll Pop, however you enjoy it, is kind of the conundrum. There's only so many ways you can do it. And I look back on my, I want to say, 29 years of playing video games. There was far more creativity back in the early days because nobody had really done any one thing to death. And now, certain genres are becoming literally crushed to death under the weight of doing the same thing over and over again. And I think that's the lesson that we were supposed to learn from Minecraft. There's a new way to get to the center of that Tootsie Pop. There always will be. But it will be up to the really creative people. And I'd like to imagine myself as one of those really creative people, but I'm not really great at making video games either. Now, applying the Tootsie Roll analogy to an area that I know a lot about, I think I know a lot about it. Since I've been playing these games also for a very long time, and I played a lot of the original games like this to come out of Japan, since they were made pretty much nowhere else at the time, H games also suffer from the Tootsie Roll analogy. There's only so many ways to get to the center of that Tootsie Pop. It seems like a lot of developers for H games basically are stuck on, well, let's stick the Tootsie Roll Pop in a different orifice and see how that goes. There's only so many orifices that one can stick it. Anyway, the point is, trying to do something creative in that scene as well is very hard, which is why you get RPG Maker game after RPG Maker game that are basically the same thing, but with a different artist, a different voice actress. It's stagnant. There's only so many ways you can do it, which is why I think thinking outside the box, even if what you're going to do is use RPG Maker, needs to be more of a thing. There needs to be more content creators that just make tile sets, character sprites. And that's one thing I think that me and my buddy Barreter really ran into the other day. He posed the question, what other ways are there of delivering the content that is the most entertaining about H games in a unique way, a different way that's been done? And I posed to him that there's only so many ways. Essentially, you can copy any other game that exists and just add your content to that concept. And I don't think there's a way that it hasn't been done. You can make the content driven by the story, so you can have a good story, you can have a bad story. Doesn't matter. Make the story drive the content. You can make the content the focus aspect of the game. So whatever it is you're doing in the game, whatever game style or type or system you want to go on, the main objective is getting to milestones that give you the content, which is in its own way entertaining. That's what a lot of games do, essentially. You could also just do the reverse of that and make the content completely hidden and be like, here's the game, go find it. If you miss stuff, yes, you'll have to play the game again. But there's a few different ways to do it. And I think, like, you look at the Honey Pop games, for example, which, are great games, but as far as content goes, they're not really the main aspect of the game. They try to make a fun game that also has content. So each person is going to have to decide what they want it to really be. And the more creative that person is, the better the game is going to be. And so it goes back to the Tootsie Roll analogy. EA only knows two ways of delivering their content. They only know two ways to get the center of that Tootsie Pop, I think. Basically. They just rehash it, do it again, add better graphics, which is all great and well. I mean, they make a lot of money. A lot more money than I make. Hell, Jim Sterling rags on them, and he makes way more money than I make. I think the industry is going to have to eventually realize, like a lot of industries have realized, like marketing industries are constantly reinventing themselves as much as they can, that creativity is going to be the thing that is a constant necessity. If you're not being creative, you're not getting anywhere. In suffice, I'd like to state that I'm not trying to name drop Jim Sterling just to get more views or anything. He actually was in my dream, and to my knowledge, this is the first time he's been in a dream of mine. And to be honest, I think the camera adds 10 pounds, because in my dream, he was actually, pretty trim compared to what you see in his videos. At this point is usually where most people would say, like, subscribe, share, yada yada yada. But I don't care. You do what you feel is right. And if you do anything, don't do anything I wouldn't do twice.